I'm Kelly. I'm the owner of the Sewing Circle and a teacher at Durham College. Today I'm going to be going over how to cut out your lining pieces for your half-scale jacket, as well as your pocketing and your interfacing pieces. So I have already cut out our lining or pocketing for our pockets, as well as a reinforcement piece, and all our interfacing pieces. So our upper and lower collar, our under collar template or roll line, our front interfacing, both. And since we're doing our jacket, one half of it will be done with hair canvas, which is a traditional tailor's interfacing, but we're also going to do the cheater way, or the Sewing with Nancy way, which is iron-on interfacing. So I've cut out hair canvas for one side and weft interfacing for the other side. Generally, you'll use a better quality interfacing, such as weft, woven interfacings, or even knits, rather than the Pellon brands, which are just a non-woven interfacing. And then I've also done a template for my lapel out of my iron-on, and my upper chest, one side will be hair canvas, one side will be iron-on, and then a little bit of stabilizer or interfacing for my welt pocket. The last thing I'll be going over in this video is cutting out your lining pieces, as well as marking them and putting on your thread tags, which is a little piece of thread that is sewn through both layers, and marking it so that you can make sure you know where your dart points are or other matching points on your pattern. Here are the pieces you will need to cut out of interfacing, either hair canvas or woven iron-on interfacing. So we have our front interfacing piece. You would actually be cutting two if this was a real garment, but we're going to be cutting one out of canvas and one out of iron-on interfacing. So that's why I have one here, and they're going to be mirror images of each other. So whatever side your iron-on glue is, this will go on the other side. So because the iron-on glue will go onto the back of your fashion fabric. You'll also cut one out of your upper front interfacing, out of canvas and out of your iron-on interfacing. Do note that these pieces are cut on the bias for your hair canvas. I did cut this one on the bias for my chest piece, and this needs to have the glue that will adhere. So this piece, my glue's down. This piece, my glue is also down because it will fit into this piece here. So I want this piece to adhere to the fashion fabric. This one's going to adhere to the actual canvas piece. And then my lapel piece, I traced off this piece. So this one here, and this one's glue side up because it's going to flip over and adhere to this piece. So that'll be your roll line lapel piece. So it needs to have the opposite glue. So this is glue side down, this is glue side up, so that it goes onto each other. And same thing with this side. This is glue side up, glue side down, glue side up, so that they can go on each other. If you are cutting out your for your homework, you will have to make a lower collar that is pad stitched. I'm using hair canvas, so you'll need to cut two on the bias. But if you are doing this on a regular jacket and don't want to pad stitch your collar, you would interface both your under collar and your upper collar with iron-on woven interfacing. And then additionally, you would use your roll line template to make a bit of iron-on interfacing for your under collar with iron-on. And the last thing you need with iron-on interfacing is your welt pocket interfacing piece. It's a little bit smaller than your actual welt pocket, so don't use your same welt pocket piece. You'll have to use the interfacing template. All right, so those are your pieces that you need for your jacket, half-scale jacket interfacing. Sometimes I pre-cut 2-inch, 1-inch, and sometimes even 3-inch strips of interfacing, either on grain or the cross grain, so that I can then use them as needed on my hems. So this is a quick, easy way of getting your hems interfaced if you pre-cut them. This one is cut on the cross grain, which means that the stronger way is going this way. And like I mentioned, I sometimes also do it on grain going, the grain is going this way. And then the other one would be to go with the grain going this way, and this would be the most stretch. You will also need to interface the bottom hem of your back and sleeves. If you have side, front, or back side pieces, you will also interface those. For our quick, easy half-scale jacket, you could use iron-on interfacing, woven iron-on interfacing, knit interfacing, or weft interfacing. I like to pre-cut 2-inch and 1-inch strips, which make it handy if you want to do a double interfaced hem or a single interfaced hem. You just grab a roll and apply those. Additionally, there is a product called Wigan, W-I-G-A-N, that works well for full-size jackets. It often comes bias cut on predetermined 2.5 to 3-inch wide strips, which is great for hemming jackets and sleeves. So you would want to make sure that, and this is a sew-in kind, it does not have any adhesive on it. So in addition to your other interfaced pieces, you will need to have interface pieces again for your back and sleeves, either 1 inch or 2 inches wide, as our half-scale jacket hems are 1 inch. Okay, another place you might want to interface is your sleeve cap. So after you have sewn your front and back sleeve pieces together, the sleeve cap will be complete. So again, you might want to take your pre-cut strips and apply them around the sleeve cap. Now I've cut this so that the stretchy goes this way, so that as I would be interfacing, I could stretch this around and make it fit. An alternative thing that you could do is cut your woven interfacing in bias strips, which will again have some stretch as it goes around here. So you want to interface. So this seam allowance is 1/2 inch. So if I use 1 inch pieces, and then it would come around, and I generally only put it just past where my notch would be here and here, or just the very top of the sleeve cap. So that is where this would get placed. It just provides a little bit more stability. Another thing you might choose to do is actually interface the whole sleeve cap with a wider piece of interfacing. So across the entire sleeve cap. But if you use anything bulky and your fabric is light, this line will show. So you do have to be careful, and you could go even a little bit wider and then do the arc around. But generally just going across with a wider piece is enough, but cut on the bias if you're using woven to make it more pliable. So this would be an iron-on piece, either a lightweight knit or a lightweight woven, both iron-on, cut on the bias or cut in the direction that it stretches. In addition to the jacket fashion fabric pieces you will be cutting out, these are the lining pieces you will need. The pocketing fabric that you'll be cutting out will be for the pockets, bag themselves, and a stabilizer piece. Your under collar or lower collar. You will chalk mark your pattern pieces all the way around, since we have a cardstock pattern. And then after you have marked it all the way around, including your notches and your matching points, you will then cut it out. Don't forget to mark all your points, your notches, including your dart point. If your dart point are having trouble accessing the dart points, you can poke a hole right through those. using an awl. And if you can't get your chalk in there, then you can use an iron off pen. Okay. And when you go to remove that, your pattern piece is all marked. I do find that the iron off pen does not, and the wax does not come off of polyester lining very well, so do be mindful of that. Always check your fabric markers to make sure that they come off the fabric that you're using them on. And again, because I am right-handed, I am going to cut counterclockwise around my pattern. Keeping my scissors on the table the whole time and rotating my body more than my fabric or my arm. Here, because of the angle of the cut, I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. And rotate my piece. If this was a very slippery fabric, I would not do that. I would have to rotate the fabric more carefully or not move it at all. Or ideally, because I'm using a cutting mat, use a rotary cutter. Opening and closing your blades as much as possible will deter them from getting dull quickly. And closing them completely with every cut. Now I can thread trace this, or I can transfer the marks to the other side, and then it is ready to add to my pile of cut pieces. Okay, so our next step is to just talk about some tricky cuts. So when you have a slippery fabric like lining, using a rotary cutter instead of your scissors, or using scissors with a serrated blade is better than just a regular pair of scissors. So this one has serrated blade, and then this is my rotary cutter. Now, when you're trying to get in here, you're going to be cutting along here, and you want to make sure you're hearing your fabric get cut. On a curve like this, you just want to curve your blade and tilt just ever so slightly to get in there. Some people like to use bigger blades, but it's really hard to do on curves. Actually, a smaller blade, so they make this, I think, in a 20 or maybe 30, 25 or 30, I can't remember the blade size, but the smaller rotary cutters work better for that. On here, you can't really get in with your rotary cutter into that corner. So I usually go towards it, and then I get my scissors and I go right into that corner from this angle, and then I'm going to come in from the other angle to get it in that way. That way I get a nice clean sharp corner without cutting too far in. Okay. The next thing I want to show you is doing your marking. So make sure you use an awl or a hole punch to poke through all of your circles that are needed to be marked, and then also marking all your notches. So chalk or iron off pens work well to mark these hole placements on each one, and then or in your chalk placement right there and there, or notch placement there and there. When you lift that up, you should have your marks for everything there. If this is really slippery like it is, I have a very slippery lining, before I do my thread tacks, I'm going to put some pins in it just to help me mark. Now thread tacks again are, I like to use a doubled piece of thread, and don't make it too long. If you make it too long, then it's going to get in the way. So I have my mark here. I'm just going to go into the fabric and out again on either side of my dot. Trying to get my finger. Leave a bit of thread, go in from the opposite direction, and leave a loop of thread, and then go back in the exact same way you came. Trying not to catch that. Leaving a loop of thread. Then I'm going to cut that off. I'm going to separate your layers and pull it apart and cut it in the middle. And then that is your thread tack. So that has marked the bottom of my dart, and then I'll repeat that on all dart points. So again, you're going to go in on one side of your circle and out again, and do make sure you're going all the way through. That's why you're doing this, so that you can mark both sides of the fabric. From your opposite angle. So if you think of this as a compass rose, east west, then south north or north south, and then east west again. Separate your layers and clip. Alright, so that is how you're going to mark all your pieces. I've already cut out my hair canvas. You'll also want to identify all your marks on that, and you're actually going to be cutting out this window of the hair canvas. So I'm going to just mark my little points, and then using the ruler. So, oops, the mark didn't show up. I will connect my dart points. So, and you'll actually be cutting this out of the hair canvas or on your iron-on interfacing and taking it out, because we don't want this added bulk. We have a different sewing application for this. Okay, so I've marked my dart. So I'm going to be cutting that out, and I'm just going to cut just barely outside my line rather than on my line, because I want to just remove just a little bit more of this dart, then leave it in. So we'll be joining this together with a piece of fabric underneath, which will then create our curvature for our hip and bust area on our piece. Okay, so just remember to mark it, then trim it out or draw it with your line and cut it out. All right, and that is what you're going to do for cutting and marking your lining and interfacing pieces. And then I also have cut out my pocket pieces here for your half scale miniature jacket.